Hi, very good morning to you. It's Jim from maverickstar Observatory. Just thought I'd use the next 20 minutes or so to talk about what we've gone over in the week with regards to the CO2 charts we've been looking at, the future coming glacial period which we'll be going into at some point in the near future, and really what our governments around the world have done. And we know how they've misinformed the general public as to what has caused the climate change, and they've also shut down the public debate on that. It's clear when they go after alternative sites like YouTube where information is being freely given, and they start suppressing advert revenue. I mean, we don't earn a great deal of advert revenue in any case on our channel because we just don't have the subscribers or the views. So whatever they did in regards to that wouldn't be neither here or there for us. I think before we begin in this video, we should say thank you to a few people. So big thanks to Raptor Turbos for your donation yesterday. Also someone that regularly donates to us, and I very rarely mention them, and I should do, is Texas Caregivers. Massive thank you to you guys, but a big thank you to all the other people, because you really are the ones that make it all happen. And we live in a monetary world. Without money, we simply wouldn't go anywhere. If we had more funds, could you imagine what this observatory could do and deliver for people on a global scale as well? And I think we should try and push to do more here at the observatory. I think we have to go back to old school as well, just doing some simple scientific measurements like temperature, barometric pressure in different regions of the earth. And the reason why I say that is now because temperature is a debate in the mainstream media and from these government organisations and bodies. And it's as simple as setting up a simple screen in your back garden and monitoring the temperature. And so long as you do it in the exact same way as you do all the time, you should get accurate readings of temperature. And if they're saying that we are going through a period of warming, I'm sure that if we did this as individuals and kept records of it, we could disprove that fact that it is warming, and we might even see that it's actually going cooler, which is looking like the case now with what's happened in 2021 alone. And I'm talking in relationship to the Arctic glacial rebound, if you want to call it that, where 2 million square kilometres of snow and ice have replenished lost stocks over previous years. We're looking at a recovery in 1 year more than what has happened since 2012. To put that into perspective, that's a lot of snow and ice. And I believe this earth has more tricks up its sleeve when it comes to laying down large quantities of snow and ice, and we might see that over the coming years. But we are living with governments that are taking our taxpayers' money and I think irresponsibly spending it on subjects such as CO2 and trying to combat CO2 or drive CO2 man-made CO2 output down by 2030, 2050 in some states. That money would have been better spent on other things. Like if we are returning into a glacial period and every fact and evidence points to that, then what has been spent in that respect? What has been spent on the magnetic pole reversal anomaly? Very little. And I think it's a crime almost, because we don't have any choice about paying our taxes. And it's as bad as you having your money put there on the table in front of you and a drug dealer coming along and taking some of that money, or a heroin addict taking that money, or somebody or a thief taking that money. And we should have a say in what that money gets spent on. We never do. There is no debate for us on what these governments spend our monies on. In fact, if you want to invest some of your money, not only do you have to pay taxes, but you have to also hand over your money to small observatories like ours. And I think it's completely unfair. But the reason why we're doing it that way at this observatory is because it's independence. And there is no question that nobody can tell me what sort of information, however controversial and how much it goes against the grain of what is being portrayed in mainstream media. No one can ever force me to, direct the narrative of an agenda to suit, corporate needs or, government intentions. And that is exactly what they do. It's a pincer. There's your funding for this year, and it didn't go down too well, and there was a debate. You can just imagine this being said, can't you? The debate of you disproving man-made climate change isn't really washing with some of the larger organisations that we have the funds to distribute to observatories like yours, and it'd be a good idea if we could just move off that subject. Magnetic pole reversal is a great topic. Why don't you stick to that? You could just imagine that being the case. I'm a big tea drinker, by the way. Typical English. But unlike a lot of people, I don't have milk in it, so not that English, I suppose. Why don't you get yourself a cup? But yeah, we've discussed quite a few interesting topics this week with regards to the returning of a glacial period. The truth really about CO2. What is the cause of CO2? Well, we know from what we've looked at this week that the majority of the CO2 has been outgassed from the oceans and land, and as a result of a typical temperature which has not really fluctuated that much over the last 12 years since we came out of the last glacial period. It hasn't really changed much. If we go back to that chart, you'll see where it's just fluctuated across the line of where it crosses over from interglacial to glacial periods. And of course, if we're going to keep the temperatures at those levels for a prolonged period of time, then there will be more outgassing of CO2 from the oceans. It has nothing to do with mankind, because this has been happening for the last 12,000 years. It was the warming of nature, naturally, that brought us out the last glacial period and has kept us where we are right now. But if we look at the charts, we can see we're going back into a glacial period. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that that is going to be the case, yet no money and no resources have been set aside for that. What the governments are doing with our money is spending it on trying to reduce CO2, which, as I showed in the previous videos this week, would take around 100,000 years, and at least that was the account for the last glacial period. It took 100,000 years to remove 100 parts per million. Now, when you consider we're at 400 parts per million, and it takes 100,000 years to remove just 100 parts per million, you can see how futile it is to spend this quantity of money, which could be better invested in science and improving, situations for, residents like the Canadians and the rest of Northern Europeans. We are facing a global catastrophe that nobody seems to be paying any attention to whatsoever, and millions, in fact billions of people's lives will be on the line, which is going to affect people more than what CO2 is right now. We've got a return of a glacial period on the horizon. We have a pole reversal already taking place. It hasn't crossed the 40-degree line, which is the theoretical 40-degree line. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens, but in the last 5 months we've seen a 20% increase in the speed of the migration of the poles over that same period of time. So, things are gearing up in a very negative way for us here on this earth, and it is only going to be a matter of time before they really become apparent to most of us, if they haven't already. We are set to lose a lot of our arable cropping lands that we use right now to feed the 8 billion people on this planet, and we're losing that already. We're seeing this land go offline because it can't be used, because the climate is no longer stable. We've talked about why that is the case, and what is the relationship to not just cosmic rays affecting biodiversity's health on this planet, but also the climate. Makes me really wonder where and how we will continue to go about our business in the future, when the severity of these issues that we've talked about in just this week completely go along unnoticed and not discussed, and when you see organisations shutting down the debates on alternative views on these matters, you can't help but wonder what will be the inevitable outcome of all this for humankind. It is almost sometimes easier to give up than it is to carry on. I mean, even running this little observatory, the costs involved and the costs that we've run up over the last 19 months, and we've been trying to recover it. I've been trying to explain to people, you can't have equipment running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year without breakdowns. We've got some of the equipment in the field already that we've got to recall for some maintenance, so that we can keep the information coming accurately. And then of course we want to push what we're doing already that little bit further, so that we can gather more information on some of the most critical areas of this planet, and we've got one of them covered. Canada's covered. We do have equipment in Arizona. We have had equipment in Hong Kong. We've got equipment in the East Coast, Perth, Australia. But really we need equipment in Brazil, South Africa and Russia. These are also interesting scientific areas. And we want to know what sort of radiation Brazil is getting right now, because it's in one of the weakest magnetic intensities on our planet, which is the South Atlantic anomaly, which is splitting in two over the recent years. And one of it is heading towards South Africa, the other is remaining over Brazil. We want to know what levels of radiation are there right now as the Earth's magnetic intensity, or the magnetosphere, weakens even more. We want to know what's going on in Russia. It's central Russia, where we know one of the highest intensities of magnetic intensity is in the central Russia, and we know the magnetic pole is heading towards it. I'd like to know accurate temperatures over the last 2 years, but who do we trust for this information if they're not part of the observatory themselves? How do we trust other organisations? Because there is so much propaganda going on right now. It's hard to know, who is doing good science anymore, and it's not for specific agendas. This is the state at which we are at today. And like I say, it does become hard when you should be we should have people working here for ourselves at the observatory, managing some of the workload, continually improving the equipment that we've got, and getting more equipment out in the field. But the only way we can do that is by securing more funding, and we can't even, it looks to me like, recover such a small amount of money in the next 3 months. We can't do it. I mean, another month has passed, and it's not really putting a dent in that £10,500 worth of deficit that we've built up over the pandemic period. It really becomes frustrating, because you could do a lot more, and you certainly have the ability to do a lot more, but you just don't have the fundings to do it. £10,500 is a mosquito's eyelash in the grand scheme of things. I would love to go back over the historical records, and to do that we would have to get an expedition, perhaps to Antarctica or Arctic, take some core samples and focus on the periods of time. We know the range at which we should be looking at, and the periods, and just focus more on the higher climates that should have been recorded. that don't seem to be, because I'm convinced that CO2 levels were at a lot higher levels at the same time we peaked during the last interglacial periods. So, I'd like to do core samples, but to even set up an expedition to do that would cost tens of thousands of pounds. It's just completely out of our way. You'd need, just for that expedition, equipment to core sample those cores to start with. We'd need experts that have done it before, and we'd need analyses, people that can actually, look under the microscope and then test for the parts per million of CO2 at that point in time where the Earth was in an interglacial period, and focus on the highest temperatures and the highest readings of CO2, because we would find what I've guessed already this week would be the case. What's happened is, over a certain amount of measurements or readings that was took, there was a smoothed out line which would have removed the higher levels of CO2 at the highest points of temperature risen during the interglacial period. And what that information would give us then is more evidence to tell these clowns that what they're talking about, CO2 levels at the moment that are being created by man, was simply not true. And here's the evidence. We've done the core samples, we've conducted it in the strictest possible way, scientifically as we could, to ensure that the results was accurate as possible. And here's our findings. What we find at the the maximum of interglacial periods regarding temperatures, CO2 levels was equally as high as what they are right now. And there's your evidence. Not only we know anyhow that what we've got is more than enough to disprove man altering the climate on this planet in any case, but that would just be further ammunition in our argument, because when you're dealing with these scientific boards, it's always better to go in with more evidence to support your argument than not at all, or with very little. I mean, I do believe that there's enough already on the table to win an argument, but they will never hold that debate, and especially in public, because if it's disproven that man hasn't modified the climate enough to change the climate, then there is no more need for them to raise taxes with relationship to that. And it is an excellent means of raising taxes, especially when you can blame it on mankind. So, just some of the frustrations I have, with doing what we do. I think what we're doing is a good job if we can even maintain the levels of what we're doing at the moment. I think, something is better than nothing. And, really what we do deliver for the funds that we raise is massive when you think about it. And we could do a lot more. I mean, I could easily, if I wanted to, if having the proper funding, I could take over everything. We could have proper monitoring stations on every active volcano. There's only 27 at the moment, and there would be a maximum probably about 35. We could have monitoring stations on those active volcanoes. We could give people heads up on that. We could have weather stations all over the world monitoring various weather anomalies. We could have, tectonic stations set up around, prone areas to earthquakes, and we could monitor that. We could do loads more. We could have more equipment out in the field for, analysing the effects of magnetic pole reversal. You don't need, in my view, satellites to do all this for you. I think, with what we've achieved with our magnetometers on the ground is equally as good as what Swarm mission has achieved. And at the end of the day, they use magnetometers just like us on board those spacecraft. And I would say that, if we had more of our magnetometers scattered around the world, we'd get better results, because we're actually closer to that magneto than what these satellites are in their orbit around the Earth. And we'd probably get a lot faster response. A little bit more technology, a little bit more design, a little bit more programs was written. We could have all these things linked up to active and real-time data collection. And the good thing about all these things I've talked about is we could have them all on the website, being uploaded every 15 minutes or even less. And that technology exists today. It's just the time and the money that would need to be invested, and a little team put together to do it. You would think that there would be at least some millionaires out there that was a little bit sceptical of all this CO2 garbage that's in the news. And, you know, you would think that they would be interested in knowing the truth, perhaps supporting, you know, an observatory like ours with some real funds, so that we could, you know, have a couple of extra people working here at the observatory on, you know, programming, building some of this equipment, and, you know, cleaning up a few other things around here, so that we could do a better job. Because I think science should be done with, you know, integrity, and in that respect, you know, the results that you gather, you should try and eliminate any random uncertainties and errors, you know, and do your experiments clean, so that when you get the results, they're clean as well. You know what the saying is, errors in, errors back out. And you know, we could do a lot more than what we're doing here at the observatory today. It's just always comes down to funding, and we suffer really bad. I'm sorry to go on about this, but we do. We have 30,000 people view the website in the last 2 weeks, and somebody yesterday, only because I mentioned it, chipped in $4 or £4 or £5, and well, you know, you spread that out over 2 weeks of running the observatory. What does that amount to? Not really much. But you know, it's just things need to be improved, and it's sad that small amounts of money really are what are holding us back doing a better job. And we've got something unusual here, because other YouTube channels are not, first of all, real observatories. They're more of a research platform, and they regurgitate a lot of mainstream media and stories, and they seem to have a lot more viewers and subscribers. It makes you wonder, and you can get a little bit paranoid over the fact that you are being withheld and held back on purpose because of the way you're approaching this. And that is the way we do it here, using the scientific method, being as honest as we can with our findings. Even if it's not what we want to see, you still record it as it is. That's what I believe science is about. And that's why you start out doing these things in the beginning. And, you know, I really feel sorry for them, some of these scientists that have, you know, jumped on the bandwagon of blaming mankind for creating a situation where climate has changed. I really feel sorry for these scientists that are supporting this, when I think deep down in their heart they know they're not doing themselves or anybody else any justice as a result of this. Yes, they're keeping the jobs and the pensions, but as for anything else, they're not achieving much. Anyhow, guys, I'll say what I usually do. There's a link down there if you want to help support us, or you want to help try and alleviate some of the deficit we've put up. It is going to really take an effort, I've got to say that. And you know, the link is down there. There's a link on the website as well, if you want to you know, chip in a few bucks on that as well. That'd be good. The only other thing to say is what I usually do. You know, take care of your loved ones, and as always, I suppose, bye for now.